Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of the Voiro podcast. With me, as always, is Kavita, Shenoy, founder and CEO of Voiro. Good morning.
Morning, Anand. How was your evening yesterday?
I went and watched Pathan
Yeah.
in the theatre.
To all the listeners, I would like to just point out that this is the same Anand who bet against theatrical releases not surviving. So far, you have contributed more than I, a firm believer in theatrical releases, over Avatar as well as Pathan.
And Kutte.
And Kutte. Oh my goodness. How was the experience? But
I'm a family man.
What can you say?
What can I say? I must say that Pathan is built for the theatre. Like, I don't think I could have watched it at home. All the jazz and the fighting and the jumping and the unrealistic fight scenes.
So even in this classy premium experience of the theatre that you went to, were people hooting, whistling, clapping and shouting?
Yes, not as much as the old Rex,
Right.
but there were some woos
Oh, nice.
in the crowd, including from my own family.
I was reading, as usual, I get all my news from my WhatsApp groups, my Signal groups. So there was a lot of flurry back and forth on Pathan. And the first thing, whenever Pathan came on, when it did come into our radar, was with that Besharam song where everybody was going up in arms about Deepika, Padukone in that song. And I think overall, from what I see, there are so many Shah Rukh Khan fans.
Yes.
And they are rabid. They are just like, Shah Rukh Khan is God. But that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to go to the theatre, to decompress a little bit, to go and have some fun and come back. I don't know. Didn't you have fun? I mean, I'm sure that it wasn't entirely your jam.
I'm not going to lie. I did have fun.
Yeah.
I did have fun. I was rolling my eyes and I thought it was over the top. But then there was this moment when Salman Khan came in and joined the fight.
Oh,
and
man.
I found myself clapping. So,
I love it. I love a good masala Hindi movie myself. Speaking of news and where I get it, yesterday I was inordinately excited about watching Palki Sharma's new news show, Vantage, that came online, and it was on firstpost.com. And after years, I've actually waited on a countdown screen, waited for something to come on live, and I watched it. And
after the days of Star News,
yes,
NDTV's 8 p.m.
And this is at 9 p.m. And I was thinking to myself, and I was talking to some of my neighbors who are also avid news watchers. They are obviously a generation above me, because I don't think anybody from our generation actually sits down and watches news at a particular appointed time. We kind of garner our news wherever we go. And off late I've been wondering, how do I get news in a more orderly fashion? I mean, when you go on holidays or you go out of the country, you put on the TV in your hotel room, and it's usually a CNN that's on, and you're watching news, and it's some kind of a BBC News coverage, and you're watching world news. But there is no specific space in India that I actually watch news. And I'm speaking strictly for myself, not for my generation or anything of that sort. But I know amongst the four of us in office as well, between Anand, Jimmy, you and me, our news is between our groups and what we see on Twitter and things like that. So,
what did you think? Did you like it?
I liked it to a certain extent. I liked it because it's in what she says, it's an India perspective, which we don't have. We have Arnab on one side who's shouting, and that in itself kind of like, I kind of cancels itself out. I can't focus on what he's saying. And I don't know where this show is going to go eventually, because it was only her this time. There was no news crew. There was nobody else taking over for any other kind of a special story from her at 9 p.m. Also, I found it strange that she said a couple of things. I mean, she announced a couple of headlines, and there's one headline she didn't cover, which was, is the Earth's core moving slowly? I don't know what happened there, but I mean, they covered everything from the Republic Day, the significance of the Egypt Prime Minister coming to for the celebrations this time. And they had a lot of the foreign embassies wishing us. It was very Indian, the show. It was extremely Indian. But it was enjoyable to an extent where there was a lot of explaining being done. I'm not sure how it will fly in the long run for the really serious news watchers, but I'm very hopeful about the fact that it may bring on new news watchers, people like me who want to watch news and understand more about what's happening instead of assuming that I already know the context of what is being said. So there's something there, and she's available on Instagram, on Twitter. She's a celebrity in her own right in the way she positions herself. She's got a big following, and she's easy to understand as well. So I feel like she's going to attract an entirely new batch, an entirely new audience.
I hope so, because if I think about what you're saying and apply it to how I consume the news, I miss the days of consuming a news update via video, but from a source that is tempered, centered. Um, the Star News NDTV days used to be that. It was a 30-minute update, but it was actually easy to watch. Today, the updates are either sensational, screaming and shouting, and
Highly
I cannot-
polarized.
highly polarized, or highly satirical, which is also something that I like on certain days, but not all the time. Right?
Sometimes you just want to know the news
I
as
just
it
want to know
is.
the news. Very fast will be a great way for this to happen, because today what I've ended up doing is I've started to consume the daily news via written update, where I don't have to worry about someone screaming. It's a lot easier for me to digest. Things like the Signal, things like the Ken or Morning Context for business news, but at least it's in written form.
Yeah. And it's not time bound. A lot of these things you could read it over a period of 72 hours. It's still be relevant. So I enjoyed the show. She spoke. It was all around the Republic Day and about how India has been, a well-functioning republic way before we actually signed into this constitution 74 years ago. It was almost as if she was telling everybody to take back what actually belongs to you instead of thinking that most of these things are Western concepts. Little right-winged. I enjoyed it. I was locked on. I was at dinner. At our neighbor's house, at Jude's house. And I had gone for a run with him before that. I said, at 9 p.m. I want to tune into this. And he's like, oh my God, why? And I was like, because I want to hear the news. He's like, and he rattled off a couple of other people who he listens to, and they also have private channels. And I was like, I want to listen to this lady because I want to hear what she has to say. And he didn't have a TV in his house or in his living room. So I put my phone on. At 9 p.m. I had an alarm. I put it on and I watched it. And I'm happy for it. I liked it. And I think I'll tune back in every day.
I saw your text on our group.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't watch it because I was watching Pathan.
Pathan. Hey, man, you got to make choices. And that's the choice you made. In other news on content, I'm excited about Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones and the Six. And it has these almost famous vibes. So it's written by this author called Taylor Jenkins Reid. And she has this book out. And I, of course, caught wind of this release from Instagram, as I get all my news clearly. And it was, when I watched it, I first thought, oh, is it about Fleetwood Mac? Is it about that rumors era with Stevie Nicks? Is this about Stevie Nicks? Then I obviously went into...
I don't know what is it about.
It's about a band.
Okay.
It's about this girl called Daisy Jones. And she's supposed to be this very ethereal, long-limbed girl who lives in the Hollywood Hills in LA, has parents who are very rich, who are very involved in their own lives. And so she's a poor little rich girl. She's got no friends. She's got no siblings, no cousins, no family, nothing. And she's kind of putting herself out all the time to try and make friends. And there's a joke apparently in the book where she tries to bake a cake for her mailman. And then she suddenly discovers herself by going down to the strip, the gritty strip. And she gets let into all of these bars at the age of 14 and she starts drinking and smoking, a la Drew Barrymore. And she has these blue, lipid, large eyes that some contact lens company actually names it after her, saying, Daisy Blue Eyes or something of that sort. So when I was reading it, I kept thinking, is this real? Is this person real? Is this entire thing real? But it's fictional, much like Almost Famous. But it still has that grit of rock and roll and...
I'd watch. When is it out?
It's out in March. And the other thing that's out in March is also Succession.
Knew it.
Love it. So I don't
I
know
saw
when
another
I'm going to
clip
get work
this
done.
morning.
Yes.
There's another clip that came out this morning.
Yeah. And there's also another very interesting one that's coming out on HBO Max, which is White House Plumbers. Hilarious.
Where have I been
Hilarious.
living?
Yeah.
I have a running list of things I need to watch, and other than Succession, doesn't include any of these.
Yeah, this you got to watch. These are the Watergate masterminds, Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy, and how they accidentally topple the presidency in their, you know, their effort, overzealous effort to try and protect it. And I mean, the clips are hilarious. The trailer's hilarious. It's got a great cast. Everybody says what instead of what. So I'm just excited about this whole thing. Whole of March, although it's going to be painful for us in India because we're closing books end of the financial year, trying to get all our sales deals
Closing
in.
books, sales deals, Succession,
What?
this movie,
Daisy Jones.
IPL.
IPL. Yes. Nobody's going to get any work done, or
Lord help us.
everybody's going to get work done very fast to go into our content. But you got to love it. You got to love the content that's coming our way. And I'm excited for what's coming up next financial year as well. Speaking of the next financial year and new things, you have something for us.
Speaking of IPL.
Yes, it's WPL, IPL, WIPL. What is
Whipple.
it? Sounds really bad.
15 years after the launch of the original IPL, we have now seen the launch of the women's IPL. Between 2023 and 2027, Viacom 18 has paid 951 crore, $118 million for 5 years of rights. And I spent some time looking at it, and I have my rusty newspaper here, which has all the numbers. Now, the one thing that everyone's talking about is that unlike the rights auction for the men's IPL, the BCCI this time did not set a reserve price. And I thought that was well done, because they believed that if they allowed the auction dynamics to just work themselves, they would have multiple people trying to get a foot in the door because of the fact that it's such a limited space. And so you want to hobnob with the bigger IPL. You want to hobnob with the advertising community. You want to be in this party. And they got it right. So how it went down. And of course, there's enough chatter about how the fact that the math itself is encouraging for the sport itself, but still very hard to see how they can be sustainable or turn this into a profit. And they won't. Most likely will not. Nobody will. So Viacom 18 won the bid. They picked up 5 years of rights for 7 crore per match. That's 870,000 US dollars. Now, interestingly, everywhere they kept saying media rights, media rights, media rights. Unlike the men's IPL auction earlier this year, where it was specifically said package A, digital rights, package B, television rights, and then C was optional rights and D was international rights. There was none of that this time.
So this was like worldwide media rights.
So I tried, I couldn't find it. But somewhere I found one piece of literature that said it's TV plus digital.
Okay.
It's basically everything. I don't think they've carved out any specific properties. That seems to be the case. But I find it odd that that's not spelled out everywhere. So 7 crore per match. Now, for comparison, the men's IPL last year went for 58 plus 58 crores, 116 crore. So this is 7 crore versus 116 crore. And then was an apples to apples comparison per match. But this is 15 years later. And for reference, the first ever IPL went for 11 crore per match, or $2.7 million at the time, where the exchange rate was 41 rupees to the dollar.
Oh, those were the days.
Yeah. So it's still not a proven league, but it's encouraging to see that the rights were picked up for a substantial amount. This will spark the sport. In fact, this is the second highest deal for a women's sport league after the WNBA in the US. And so I like it. Now, according to the Mint, Viacom 18 is projected to lose about 600 crore, or about 75 to $80 million over the 5-year period, after making money from both ads and distribution and subscription, which will be amplified by a slowdown in ad spend in 2023. But they're hoping that this will cater to a new audience and therefore will bring on board an entire new collection of advertisers. This week, they also auctioned off the rights to own 5 teams: Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, and Lucknow, for a combined bid of about $600 million, 4,669 crore, against a benchmark of 1,000 crore, which is what they wanted to raise. So It's a nice way for the league to begin. It's good numbers. It's a nice way for a new tranche of audiences, advertisers, and owners to come together. And overall, I think it's great for Indian sport.
And at the end of the day, if you look at it, if you take it out into a more macro view, you have Geo at the center of everything, right? So now you can see the entire space kind of getting consolidated, or their mastermind plan from an ecosystem perspective, which is going back to several episodes before where we spoke about how every large company is trying to get into an ecosystem play and have their finger in many, many pies. But if you look at the whole media pie uh, in general, you have Geo at the center. They've built out their entire news network and their news prowess. And with Palki's new show, they're trying to get newer audiences. And she's no stranger to social media and making sure that she's marketing herself, her news, and her brand, which she's bringing to First Post as well. You also have sports. You have IPL. You have WPL, which is now part of Viacom 18, which is, as from the news that we read, is all getting folded into one big fat company. You have entertainment. You have Geo TV from a CTV perspective. You have them there. You have Geo Fiber, which is direct to home and getting your internet to their home. And then you also have software because they have everything to do with ad technology, correct? So it's an entire ecosystem. We have a little Google happening
Oh,
here as
no.
well. So, which takes us to the next topic that we were all buzzing about. And I know that Rohan sat yesterday and read the 150-page DOJ novel. All of us have glanced over it, gone all over the internet to trying to find our favorites, commenting on it. It's an old story. We're trying to look for some new flavor here. It also comes close on the back of the ALM that happened recently. So, what are your thoughts on it? What's happening with Google, DOJ, Apple, ATT, advertising? What's going on?
So, I read a lot about how this new flavor of the DOJ filing a lawsuit against Google is far more significant than previous ones. So, I spent some time looking at it, and I was desperately trying to find whether or not they've cracked something new. Have they been able to find the crime? Have they been able to catch them with a smoking gun, or whatever you want to call it? I'm not that convinced. So, yes, following a series of litigation, including one in 2022, as well as one happening in Europe with Meta, all government policy organizations have been trying to find a way to bring down big tech or channel their anger towards the way big tech is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This particular lawsuit, which has some very interesting language about the ad tech industry, it beautifully describes the entire industry, but it specifically talks about Google's abuse of its role as the largest broker, supplier, and online auctioneer, and basically alleges that Google has hurt publishers as well as advertisers and pocketed money, taking money from Peter to give Paul.
Peter to give Paul, yes.
As well as advertisers who try and use competing products. And it uses a line at the start of the lawsuit which says, competition is broken for reasons that were neither accidental nor inevitable. And basically, they are asking to unwind all of the anti-competitive acquisitions that Google has picked up over the years. I found it to be a very confusing set of points. On the one hand, yes, big bad Google, black box, it's opaque, nobody knows what's going on. There is one example specifically of Google whitelisting publishers who do not use header bidding and funneling more dollars towards them. Yes, it's also a series of successful acquisitions. The more you think about it, this is all a string of pearl strategy that has gone very well. DoubleClick, AdMob, YouTube, Android, several acquisitions that Google has not just acquired but also strung together in a manner where 1 plus 1 is far larger than 2. But the only question I'm trying to ask is, did this harm the market because it stifled competition? Was there antitrust? Or was it just that it harmed the market because they were a runaway success with all of it? Because in the lawsuit itself, they specifically say if they had switched off AdX, publishers would have dropped and made 65% less revenue, which means clearly it is of benefit.
Yes.
So I read two analyses, one by Eric Seufert and one by Stratechery. And Ben Thompson says they should have prevented the DoubleClick acquisition to begin with, given at the time they already had AdWords, which means someone should have seen the fact that it can really supercharge their market presence. But again and again and again, he says, where though is the crime? Um, things like YouTube inventory is not available outside of Google's ecosystem. And Ben says, well, that's their prerogative.
Exactly.
Roku makes their own audiences available only on their DSP. It's part of the same company. Nobody is locked in. Google has aggregated the long tail, which is so large now that the market cannot do without it. And nobody else is going to aggregate it from scratch now. Ben talks about the fact that antitrust is okay as a reason to break up Google. Are they price fixing? Are they cheating? Are they engaging in antitrust practices? But he said to ask you to undo a 16-year-old acquisition because you don't like it anymore, or you think that you should have done something to begin with, is different. You read Jeff Green's response as well.
I read
in
Jeff
the Trade
Green's
Desk.
response on in an article on The Current, and I also read Miles Younger's entire long LinkedIn post. Miles Younger is the head of innovation and insights at U of Digital. And it all makes sense, and it talks to your point as well. It's all based on a very shaky rhetorical of the coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? And they're saying that, 30 cents on the dollar is something that is unfair. Based on what? What else should the price be, right? It's specifically too high, then what should that price be? What is a fair profit to a web publisher? And there's a lot of things that don't add up over here. It's just like finger pointing, saying that you're too successful for your own good. Okay, so what is the alternative? Will the government actually give me coupons to subsidize me using the internet and actually pay publishers and support responsible journalism? Will they do that? And he also goes back in time to talk about how we access television and newspapers and magazines from stands. We had advertisements in them that were paid for by the advertisers to the publisher. And we paid the publisher the amount of money to actually buy that magazine. Nobody gave us that magazine for free. So there is the business of running a publishing business digitally, physically, wherever else. Google got around to it, they thought in decades, right? They thought in several decades ahead, and good for them. But for the government to sit up now and say that they are wrong is kind of reaching at this point, because I don't see anything that they have done is wrong. They have been far more than open. But Jeff Green's response is hilarious, which is where he says, competition? Me? I'm competition? The Trade Desk to Google? He basically says that, yes, I'm competition maybe to one really small part of your business,
This
but
is
not
the 37th
yeah,
priority.
37th priority, but not everything else. But Google went from strength to strength. Shareholders are happy. Are shareholders complaining? They're not complaining. So I'm confused by this narrative, but it just boils down to one fact, right? One fact that Google has dominated a largely unregulated ads business. And that is the same issue now we are seeing in Apple. And that brings us to what's happening at what happened at ALM and IAB, and what we saw everybody shouting and screaming about in terms of what Apple is doing, etc. So it's unregulated. So it's open season, right? Anybody can take any part of the pie that they can organize. So organize it and take it. Who's stopping you? Nobody's stopping you. They can be stopped if there's some regulation, but where is the regulation?
Yeah, I'm waiting to see more information come out of IAB ALM, the IAB's annual leadership meeting. But I did enjoy a podcast by Anthony Katzer, who's the CEO of IAB Tech Lab, going into the event. So Marketecture and Ari Paparo have a new podcast, which is actually quite nice to listen to. Interestingly, on the previous episode, they did two things. One is they interviewed Anthony Katzer about and asked him about ALM and what he feels going into it. And next week we can break down what comes out of it. But they also said, hey, we want to talk about ad tech tax. And they just went for it. Said, we hate it. We hate the fact that people call it tax. Everyone's acting as if it's either robbery or it's inefficiency. But they basically said that, the ad tech machinery is so complicated, moves far more money than the financial industry. And if you're telling me that it takes 30 cents on the dollar to pay for that entire machinery, I think that's fair. And so they went on by saying, you don't hear me say I'm paying, computer tax. If you add up the cost of all the individual parts versus how much I paid, that's the value of a supply chain. So Anthony Katzer basically said, in his opinion, our industry has had two watershed moments so far. The invention of the ad server and the invention of RTB, real-time bidding. and we are at the inflection point of a third watershed moment. He said, I don't know what it is, but it could be one of many things. But he said, if I had to bet money, it would be measurement. He said, the pipes of buying and selling are taken care of. They will evolve. They will have to fight policy. Anyone who is not seen favorably by the governments or policymakers that be will have to figure it out. And that's Apple and Google and everybody else. But he said, from a technology perspective, the pipes have been figured out. They will get better and better and better, but there is no figuring out left to do in terms of going from 0 to 1. But he did say that given the fact that identity is fragmented, users across multiple devices now, digitization of supply, connected TV, he said we're at a very exciting inflection point in terms of how consumers can consume content. But the next watershed moment is going to be measurement. He said many people have come forward with their standards across iSpot TV, UID 2.0 or UID 2, Nielsen's own evolution. He said, what I'm excited about is that there will be a watershed moment right now, which will become the global standard. And I think a lot of the agenda at ALM also focused on measurement.
Yeah.
Specifically.
In his opening speech, in his opening address, David Cohen, who is the CEO of IAB, also went at a bunch of sensational things like Apple and ATT and the kind of pressure Apple had put on everybody else, and they kind of kneecapped the industry as well. And, they were really getting upset with Apple because Apple isn't coming to the table to talk to them about what they're doing. They're just doing whatever they want to. Again, there is no particular compulsion for Apple to do anything in correlation to what IAB is doing. It's just that there's a precedent set by Google where Google has played well with IAB. They have said, I'm going to do this, and IAB knows that they're going to do it. And maybe people had time to prepare, maybe they didn't. But there's a lot of upheaval in how dare you. Yeah. That's kind of the narrative I'm kind of hearing right now. It's about how dare you? How dare you do this? Yeah. When everything was going swimmingly well, we just had one person or one company that we had to take care of, which was Google, and now you have Apple coming in to sort of take their pound of flesh. But there's a lot of upheaval happening. Everybody is kind of taking their own corner of the market. It's being pushed by regulation, like you just said. The pipes to buy and sell are already there. People have to only deal with regulation and policy. So everybody is drawing a line around what's theirs now because they're afraid that regulation and policy will take that away from them, and that's their moat. Speaking of regulation and policy and what's happening at IAB and the sense of mistrust and everybody's kind of a lot of cloak and dagger happening and everybody pointing fingers at everybody else. Twitter and that whole advertising debacle that happened where advertisers just pulled out because they don't know what the hell was happening with that entire company, has gone on and signed on Integral Ad Science and Double Verify on their brand safety initiative. And you the other day sent us an interesting article about what Twitter is doing to attract their advertisers back again. What are they doing?
They're offering them a 2-for-1 or a matching grant. So up to $250,000. And I think they have to spend the money by February 28. Twitter's offering wooing advertisers back to the platform by saying we'll give you a 1-for-1 match.
Nice. You think they'll take it up?
I don't think it's silly of Twitter to do it for two reasons. One is they've lost a lot of advertisers. I don't think in all the initiatives that went down since Elon Musk bought Twitter, right, where he said, I want to make it the town square, I need to fix it, and torched half the company. I don't think he forecasted the fact that if advertisers go away because they might not be happy with the vibe of the platform, it's actually far more detrimental to the platform than anything else that could happen in terms of moderation or anything else. So they're probably sitting on a lot of excess inventory, which means for them to offer it is probably not that much of a cost to them other than on paper. Should they do it? Yes, of course. You have to go advertisers back. There is no way. If they are primarily funded by an ad-supported model, it is a no-brainer that they have to do everything in their power to do it. If it means extending this beyond Feb 28, so be it. I mean, what are you going to do with wasted inventory anyway, otherwise? But I suspect that this will not be enough.
I want to think of it another way. And I asked you this question some time ago. I haven't got an answer. And disclaimer here, I don't know Twitter advertising as well as I would like to. But whenever you see a promoted tweet on your own feed, you don't get any kind of ad commission on it, do you? So suppose I'm on
Yes.
Anand, you don't. I'm not sure whether it's the same thing for a publisher. So if I'm Vice.com and I'm on Twitter and I have an ad that's shown on my feed, do I get cut in on the ad dollars that are being spent on targeting? I feel if they play that side of the game as well, and maybe reinvent the game a little bit, also give publishers and advertisers who have platforms on Twitter a reason to be there more than just spending money, but actually to make money over there in some way. I feel like it will at least spark some interest, along with obviously what they're doing in terms of safeguarding brand safety and making it more transparent and things like that. But everybody wants to make some money today. Everybody. And if you and Twitter is a place for journalism, and most publications are really tight on cash. If you give them an additional revenue source, they'll happily lap it up. And they have direct connections to advertisers. So today, if I'm able to give you the ability to have branded content as a tweet, as a promoted post within the Twitter universe, brought to you by a specific publication, and I have the advertiser within that branded content, everybody wins. Because if I'm cut in on the on ads that are shown on other people's feed for what Twitter is doing, which is this 1:1 thing, I make some money as well.
I think they're going to have to think differently like that. Traditional thinking, I don't think is going to work for them. They're a different kind of platform. They're going down the slope, and they have to find a way to climb back up.
Yeah, and it's and the macro, scene as well right now is not in their favor, with advertising getting depressed, people holding on to their cash a little bit, not wanting to experiment. It's going to be tough.
It's unfortunate. I don't know if the man who made spaceships and electric cars and interesting technology
is ready for the dirty world of advertising. Where there are no rules.
I don't know. I don't want to say shouldn't have gotten into it, but I don't know if he knows what he got into.
I'm sure they'll get out of it. And I'm sure that it'll right itself, because there's so much momentum over the years that they would have built up. And so all they have to do is make that one right move, and then all of that kind of translates into better movement further on. I don't think the industry wants to punish them. Advertisers don't want to punish them either, but they really do want to have a safe place for them to go and advertise, instead of them being caught in some kind of a tweet storm of crazy.
Advertisers don't want to be associated with the wrong space.
Yeah.
I like what they're doing with bringing on board brand safety protocols and measurement, but it's the same company that just a few months before this fired the entire moderation team, right, and fired the brand safety team. So I don't know. It's things are not looking
too rosy. Okay.
I had a product that I really love to use.
Yeah, we all do. I mean, we all get our news from Twitter, and we all appreciate the platform. I really don't want I don't want to be paying for it, because I know it'll become unaffordable after a point, because I don't think it can be supported only with one source of revenue. It needs to be supported by multiple, not even just two, not even just advertising and subscription. You could probably introduce transaction. I don't know. There are a lot of things you could do within that platform. But it's sad. It's sad, but I'm sure that they'll pull themselves out of it. Absolutely sure. Okay, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Before we go, I wanted to just point out that we recorded a very, very in-depth session with Vikram Chande from
I loved it.
Samsung TV.
I loved it. I really liked it.
And if you haven't listened to it as yet, please go and listen to it. We have a lot of snackables thanks to Santosh that's coming out on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, so you can catch snippets of it if you don't want to watch the whole thing. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any points of view that you want to share with us on what we just spoke about, we'd be happy to listen to it. If you want to come onto the show, write to me or Anand, or ping us on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to bring you onto the show. Before we leave, there is one thing that we have yet to download, but it's interesting for you guys to do as a weekend reading, which is TV Rev's new part 2 of Fast or the New Cable, where they cover advertising.
Specifically advertising. It's free for now to download.
Yeah, for limited time only. So download it. We're going to unpack it next week.
We read the first one and I remember really liked it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know what they get into here.
Yeah. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
Bye.